sir. All right, Bob, Russ, Tommy, let's do it. What we're going to do tonight is a question and answer session. Bob is going to be our moderator. He has a list of questions that he's going to ask the three of us. And I think you're going to take some questions from the audience too, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to turn it over to Bob. You're in charge now. Just be kind.
Okay, I like to be in charge.
Easy question.
Man, I actually came prepared. I've got sheets and sheets of questions.
Let's move you over just a little bit.
Like this?
I'm going to sit behind you. There we
Don't do
go.
that.
All right.
There's a chair.
While Bob is getting started,
Your chair.
all we have heard Bob say before, there's no such thing as a stupid question, right, Bob?
That's correct.
How about stupid answers?
There are such a thing as stupid.
Okay,
Yeah, there are. Can everybody hear? Need mic a little bit. You can hear me? Good. And we'll pass it back and forth. You got it? No.
Hello.
There you go. Okay, we're going to keep this kind of informal. I do have some prepared questions, and I have pre-thought of some comments I might want to make on that. But, again, we'll go through a few of these questions, and then we'll kind of just open it up, see what questions you've got and what opinions we have. Part of the purpose of this is to see different opinions. Not everybody does everything exactly the same way. We're not cookie cutters, and so it's always entertaining to see how people do things and maybe why they think they're doing it, if they know why they're doing it. Okay, the first question, and this question is an old beekeeping question. It's been around ever since Bob Safety was a little boy. And the issue is queen excluders. Now I know some people say you can't survive beekeeping without a queen excluder. They'll be able to keep the queen down in the brood box and of course keep the honey and the brood separated. Other people cuss them. And the guy I would put to an example, which a lot of us probably don't know, but I did know really well, was our good friend, deceased now, Bill Shepherd. Bill did not like queen excluders. He did not like them. I've actually seen him open the hive before and just sling it down to the woods. Somebody's going, I paid $9 for that thing. You know, he just slung it down to the woods. And so he didn't think much of it. Now, here's the question. And you can kind of take it in order. Do you use queen excluders? In some of your comments, is that a positive, a negative? And what's some maybe other uses of a queen excluder? Is it a good, useful piece of information?
Who wants to go first?
I'll start it.
Awesome.
Well, I use queen excluders on most all of my hives. I've got a few that don't have a queen excluder on. I'll start with a queen excluder, and if I can't get bees to come up into my supers, I'll take it off till they start getting up in there. And after they start drawing out some comb and start putting up a little honey, I'll put the queen excluder back on, making sure that the queen's down underneath. Another thing I use the queen excluder for, used to do it years ago when I first started keeping bees. Every time I caught a swarm of bees, I would put a queen excluder on top of the bottom board, put the bees in the hive, and set the hive on top of it. That kept that queen from getting out and kept them bees from leaving. Every once in a while now, I still have a swarm leave because I'm too lazy to do that. I buy some of those plastic queen excluders now, and I cut me about a 2-inch strip, and I'll just put them across the front of my hive when I catch a swarm. I'll leave them for a few days. You can't leave them long because the drones can't get in and out and all this stuff. But yes, I use queen excluders on most all my hives, most of the time, not always.
I feel like Admiral James Stockdale in the 1992 debate among the 3 vice presidential candidates. It was Al Gore, Daniel Quayle, and Admiral Stockdale. And he started off, who am I? Why am I here? And his intent was to set the stage as to how he differed from his two opponents who have been in politics for a long time. I'm the token hobbyist up here. So as you're liable to hear stupid answers from me. But I use queen excluders on all of my hives, much the same way that Tommy does. And also I found that whenever I combine hives, because the hive goes queenless, having the queen excluder there is a good way to keep the paper in place too, for a short period of time.
Since we have so many new people, do you want us to introduce ourselves?
Yeah, sure, go ahead. That's a good idea. That's a good idea.
I'm Tommy Helms. I actually live in Mecklenburg County. I started keeping bees in 1975 and kept them until the mid to late 80s. Quit for a few years, started back, I don't know, a few years ago.
I'm Russ Olson. I'm married to Linda. We've been beekeepers for about 6 years, and we started doing it because we thought it was the right thing to do for our environment. And also there's the coolness factor too. And the number of hives we have varies from 1, I think we got up to 6 one time. 4 is a good number for me.
And my name is Mark Smith. I started keeping bees in 2011. I went chemical free in 2014, so I don't use any chemicals in my colonies. And I flex between 18 and 25 colonies. So now, to answer the question. I do not use queen excluders. I have a bunch of them. I use them more as a tool. Most people use them in honey production to keep the queens out of the honey supers. Well, one thing I've learned over the years is if you let the colony form what I call a honey cap over the brood chamber, 9 times out of 10, and that's the reason I say 9 times out of 10, because you'll always have that one rogue queen. She won't cross that and go up into the supers and start laying. So, and even if she does, once that brood emerges, they'll backfill it with nectar. So I do not use them. I do have them. I use them as a tool for certain things, but I don't use them in my honey production.
Okay, thanks. Again, we've set a kind of a wide range here a little bit on that usage. And again, there's no necessarily right answer. I know Bill, again, speaking of Bill Shepherd, he would say that first honey super is your queen excluder. Once they put honey in there and they've capped that honey off, that pretty well keeps that queen suppressed down below it. And again, my experience has been not all the time. And by the way, if you've been popping frames out of supers before, late at night, extracting honey, and you run across a couple of frames of brood, it's aggravating. Gosh, that's aggravating. And plus the fact you always think, gee, I've weakened my hive here some because of the amount of brood I'm seeing. And nobody wants to see dead larvae floating in a jar of honey, right? I guess you could say that's all natural. Cell component, yeah. Protein, yeah. Okay, so we sell that, and I will make a little side comment too, since Tommy mentioned plastic queen excluders. When they first started making queen excluders out of plastic, they stamped them things out. Okay, there was a stamp process, just, you know. When they did that, the edges would have a sharp edge, okay? Now, I did see that bees do not like those sharp edges. Now, some of the new old plastic ones, they've stopped doing that, okay? They're more rounded. So if you got some old plastic ones, kind of feel it with your hand. If you feel kind of a sharp edge, the bees are not going to favor those at all. Not at all. So again, the new ones are better than some of the old ones. That was a drawback on them. Okay, second question. This one, gonna be some ranges on this too. Okay, here recently, terramycin has become harder to get. You gotta jump through some hoops to get it. And some of those hoops means you gotta see a vet. You gotta have a vet write a prescription for it, for its use. I had still been using some terramycin myself every time I did a mite treatment. So if I had to do a mite treatment, and I'm talking about varroa mites for some of the new ones. If I had to do a varroa mite treatment, I would immediately follow that varroa mite treatment with a little dose of terramycin. Okay, terramycin is a general antibiotic. And what I was thinking I was doing, maybe not doing, but I was thinking I was doing, is those mites fell off the bees, you left an open wound, okay? That open wound is a good place for different viruses and bacteria to get into that bee. So I was hoping this general antibiotic, which is terramycin, would help on that situation some. Now, if it did, it didn't, I don't know, can't tell that. But anyway, I did use some of it until just recently. The other thing that's been taken off the market because it's no manufacturer is Fumidil B. So the question is, what impact do you see of both those products not in use now to you? And then what does that future look like? What if you look 5, 10 years down the road without these products? What do you think that looks like? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? We know the existing policy of having to go to the vet adds cost. Because one of us, myself, is going to see that as a beehive. My vet is going to see it how? As a pet. Okay? It's going to price his services accordingly. Okay? Do I want to pay a vet a $200 vet bill for that prescription when I can replace those bees in half that amount of money? See, there's an economic threshold, shall we say. So again, let's talk about that. The cost, the future, good or bad, and the immediate impact to you on the lack of these two drugs.
The only one I've used is the Fumigillin, and I would use that some in the fall of the year. Of course, I'm out of it now, and I ain't gonna be able to get none. I don't know what the impact's gonna be. I haven't had too much problem with my bees by not using it, so I really don't know what to say about it. I think probably down the road they're gonna have to come up with something that we can use to take care of the problem.
I never used terramycin. I used Fumigillin B for like the first 2 years. I haven't used it since then. I have not noticed any appreciable impact on my hives one way or another. And as far as down the road, I just expect I'm going to maintain about the same level between, right around 4 hives, making up the losses by buying more bees. Mr. Organic.
Well, obviously, that's not something I would use. So it's not going to impact me hardly any. But I think one of the reasons I'm not really worried about it, I'm not worried about fungal diseases, is because I rotate out all my comb, like a 10-frame deep box. I rotate all that comb out every 5 years, two frames a year. So I've always got clean comb. I never have old comb, and so far my mite loads have been low. So as far as the bees getting bit and getting fungal diseases, I just don't have that problem.
So what, you use some kind of marking system on your frames?
Yes. On all my frames, when I install a new frame into a colony, I write the last 2 digits of the year. That way I can look across the frames and I can tell you exactly how long that frame's been in the box.
Very good. Very good. Okay. Next question. Again, back to our queens, one of our favorite subjects always. Do you mark your queens? Do you test any of your queens for performance? And if you do test them, what do you test them for? And how do you test them? Do you mark queens? Do you test? And what do you test them for?
I might mark a queen every once in a while if I have some mentees over and they want to see how to mark a queen, but normally I don't mark my queens, and I don't ever test them. I just keep an eye on them when they get where they're not doing what they're supposed to do, not laying enough eggs. start getting the spotted brood pattern, I'll get her out of there and put another queen in there. I don't mind smashing one at all. If I do test them, I test them for their reading ability.
I do not mark my queens, even though I spent 30 years as a field artilleryman and 13 years as a high school history teacher. And I'm confident in my manhood and courage. I'm afraid I'm going to hurt that delicate little insect, so I don't mark it. And I've gotten better. My wife and I have gotten better locating the queen. I picked up 3 queens yesterday from Jerry Summerall, and I asked Jerry to mark them for me, which he did. And I like Steve Emerson, once I got those queens, I said, what am I going to do with these 3 queens? So I put 2 of them in a resource hive. So that, I guess I will be testing them over the course of the next few weeks to see how well they lay. And if they turn out to be laying machines, and after the nectar flow, I'll use those to replace 2 other queens that are doing pretty good. The 3rd queen, I went ahead and put into a queenless colony and had a laying worker on it. But again, I don't mark because I'm afraid to.
You know, queens have handles. It's called wings. I mark all my queens just so I can tell how long they're living, the longevity. What was the rest of the question?
Do you test? Do you test?
Well, the ultimate test in a chemical-free apiary is whether or not the colony overwinters. If they can survive the winter, that says a lot about the genetics in the colony, which says a lot about the queen. Late winter, early spring, I did this 3 or 4 weeks ago. I raked all my colonies that successfully overwintered. Let me tell you how I rake them.
Sure.
Okay. All right, first thing I do is, and this, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to assign, whether you want to say it's the colony or the queen, whatever, I'm trying to assign a numeric number to that colony, or a grade, so to speak. So the first thing I do, without any smoke, is I'll take in the bottom brood box, I'll tilt it up so I can look at the bottom. And I don't use any smoke because I want to see where the bees are on the colony. And what I do is I count the seams of bees, not necessarily how many frames have bees hanging on them and that are visible, but the seam to me is the space between the frames. I count all those seams of bees and I set it back down. Then I go into the colony and I count how many, and I'll write that down, how many seams of bees I got. And then I go into the colony and I count how many frames of brood. I don't care if it's capped, uncapped, I don't care. I count how many frames of brood, write that down. And then I look, and to me this is the most important part of the test, is I count how many frames of stores are left over the winter. And I assign each frame a value of 2 because it's more important. I add all that up and I get a number. That's that colony or queen's grade. And I write it down inside the colony. After I do a whole apiary, that's using those numbers, that helps me decide what I want to do with that colony. Is that colony, the higher grades go into honey production. That's a reflection on the queen. She has a lot of brood. She's a good producer. We're the top third, I should say. The middle third, I break all those colonies up and make nukes out of them to sell, increase, replace my losses, whatever. And then the bottom third, those queens are kind of so-so, but they still have a use. I won't kill them, but they have a use. And those colonies become what I call resource colonies. They supply the apiary with frames of brood, pulling frames of comb, capped honey, whatever. And I use resources out of those colonies to support the rest of the apiary. So if I had to, I guess if I test my queens, that's kind of what I do. It's not so much a test of the queen as it's the colony. But if you think about it, however the colony's doing is a reflection on her.
Mark, when did you say you do that?
Usually right around the end of red maple bloom is when I do that.
Great, and that is a test. That would be a test for probably winter hardiness as much as anything, which is a good trait. Sometimes, especially if you're going to raise a queen or two, even if it's as simple as moving a sail to a queen castle, sometimes I think we don't know what we're getting unless you test. A few years ago, a couple of us got together and decided to raise a few queens, and we'd share these queens. And so we did come up with a numbering system for queens. With the idea it's based on performance, not pedigree. Okay, because you can buy a queen and the guy can call it anything he wants to call her, and that's legal. I mean, super hypogenic, whatever, all kinds of letters to it, whole alphabet behind it. Okay, that's fine. But do you really know she's performed? Okay, you're doing it because her performance in that colony. Yeah. And that colony is related to her performance, what it boils down to, and her genetics. So there are some little tests. I do like to play around with that a little bit myself. And I like brood viability. You think every bee egg hatches, right? Wrong, not true. You think every larvae every egg that does hatch, that little larvae survives? No, that's not true either. If anything at all is wrong with it, the nurse bees immediately consume it, okay? They feed it back to other bees. The material's not wasted, shall we say. But that brood viability is important. It's back to genetics, and Mike, I'm looking at Mike hard. He knows a lot about genetics, because he bought some high-dollar dogs. But in bees, you got alleles. Okay, we won't get too complicated here, but you got alleles. When those alleles start matching up too closely, guess what? All of a sudden, you'll see what looks like spotty brood. Okay, and it's just genetics. And so that's a bad trait. If that queen lays 100 eggs, I want to see 100 bees produced. Okay, and that's the ideal situation. Rarely is that the case. Best I have partially seen and measured, and I got a little cardboard card that measures out 100 cells. You ever seen that little 60-degree diagonal deal that you can put over the cat brood? And again, you can immediately then say, what's my brood viability? About the best I've ever seen, about 95. But mine, if it gets down to like 75, guess what? I'm like Tommy. She needs to be out of there. That's bad genetics. She's not performing. She needs to be out there. So again, there are all kinds of other tests you can take. Hypergenic behavior, I think, is a good test. I use the pinprick method, even though they say it's not as accurate as freezing, but still, that's what I use because it's safer, I think, for me. But again, a lot of disease problems have been shown in the past. I'm talking about in the 1930s. That a lot of disease problems can be solved with what? Hypergenic behavior. The better you keep house. The better we keep house, what do you have? Less diseases. The better bees keep house, the less diseases. Same thing. So I think testing is important, Mark. I will agree with you on that, okay?
Of some type.
Of some type, yeah. And any type is better than no type, I think. At one time, I will admit, every fall, and I'm talking about usually about the 1st of September, I requeened every colony I had. And I know I threw away some really good queens. But again, I didn't want to carry any 2-year-old queens over. And so, again, I just requeened everything. And when you do that, yeah, you got younger queens, but part of them does. I mean, this is how it works. Part of it does. Okay. Next question is off this subject, this queen subject a little bit. Storing honey. How do you store honey? What problems have you seen in storing honey? And what is your opinion on the safest way to store honey and keep it a good product?
I just extract all my honey every year and put it in jars, and most of the time I keep it in 5-gallon buckets until I get ready to bottle it up. And I just stack it up and store it like that, and I don't have any problem with it. If it starts to crystallize, I got a blanket I'll put around the bucket and heat it up and a little bit and turn it back to liquid at a time. I don't have any problem with mine.
I don't have a problem either, because I don't harvest enough honey to have to worry about it. The first year, a new beekeeper should not expect to get any honey. The second year we had bees, we had 2 hives or so, and Linda and I got like 150 pounds of honey. So that was the standard, okay? It's been going down every year. And last year, we got only like 15 pounds of honey. So I wound up buying it from Steve Emerson and Brian Fisher and other folks. Now, and I just keep it in jars up in the cabinet. It does granulate, but I just, I get a big quart or so measuring jar, fill it with water, heat that water in the microwave, and then put my jar of honey inside that container of hot water. And it's good to go, because I'll do that, because we do like to give as gifts to friends little 4-ounce month jars of honey, and I want that to be my honey, not Steve Emerson's honey. Okay?
I'm just like these guys, I try to bottle it just as fast as I can, but what little bit I don't get bottled immediately, I have a really good friend who makes cakes, and she buys cake icing by the 3-gallon buckets, and she hooks me up, and it's got a reseal, the lid's sealed, they have a rubber gasket on them. And what I can't get bottled, I put in that and I bring it in the house. I don't leave it outside in my bee shed. I bring it inside where it's air conditioned.
Yeah, and the important thing to remember is that honey does not spoil. I know Bob has said this before, and I've read also that archaeologists have found honey in ancient Egyptian tombs that's 2,000, 3,000 years old. I mean, it's not a liquid anymore, but it is granulated, but it still tastes okay.
If I have any crystallized after I put it in jars, I've got a small glass door refrigerator with a light bulb in the bottom of it, and I just sit it in there and it heats it back up slowly, and it turns it back to liquid honey again.
But you want to ensure you don't make the honey hot, because if you get the honey beyond a certain temperature, what is it, 160 or something?
110.
Pardon?
At 110, you kill
Yeah, 110. If you get above 110, then what you have is just like,
It's not raw anymore.
it's just like, it's sugar syrup. I mean, you don't get any health value at all.
You can't call it raw anymore if you get it above 110.
Okay, good discussion. Temperature is always an issue there. Storing at room temperature is always better than storing in the out shed where it's cool. Because remember, when that honey's in the mid-50s and cooler, it will granulate faster. Okay, so that temperature in the house is going to slow it down some. It's still granulate with time. And the heating, you got to be careful to slow heat, not overheat. I think 110 is a good reasonable temperature. Anytime you get over 140, you're going to start actually burning some of the honey, and it will taste caramelized. That, you can never get that out, by the way. You can never get it out. Yes, John?
What did you say, if you want to heat it in a pan of water to liquefy it again, what temperature should you have that water to sit in?
Okay, now the water itself, the water can be warmer, okay?
What temperature would you say?
I'd say 130 if I had to say,
Okay.
okay? I would not recommend putting it in the microwave. Don't put honey in the microwave, you'll cook it, okay? You won't heat it uniformly, it takes time for honey to heat. Tommy's out there with the refrigerator and light bulb. I use one of the same things, and it works really good. It's a low heat, but you can maintain that heat, and it will ungranulate that honey slowly, so you haven't really damaged it. Any other comments? You good on that? Okay. Next question I got, and this is, boy, we need some help here. I know one guy, and I won't mention his name, but I'll point at him blindly. The next topic, swarm control. What swarm control measures do you use, and how successful do you think that is?
Well, I got somewhere around 85 to 90 hives in my, I was gonna start this year, trying to keep them from swarming. And it didn't take long till that got completely out of hand. So, I haven't done much swarm control. I've done a lot of swarm catching. So, I've got a couple hives that are actually making a lot of honey, and I am going through those on a regular basis, trying to cut out any queen cells, trying to keep them from making a new queen, and seeing if I can keep them from swarming. And I got one that got about 6 supers stacked on it now, and it needs another one, so they're going. That's kind of working on that one, but you know, sometimes it don't matter what you do. They don't read the same books we do, and they do what they want to do.
Like Tommy says, the best thing you can do is give them more space. Because when they feel like they're crowded, then they say, we need to find another home. He cuts out the queen cells. Again, I'm just a hobbyist with only 6 years of experience. Those can sometimes be hard to see, because they're not in the same location on every frame. And if you, all it takes is you miss one. So what Linda and I do, if we see a bunch of swarm cells, then we just go ahead and do a split. And I mean, that dramatically impacts the honey production on that hive, but at least that's one way of preventing a swarm, along with giving them more room.
Late winter, as soon as red maple starts blooming, I super. And every colony gets 2 supers right off the bat. If a colony comes through winter and it's already really strong, and they've already started, we got henbit and dead nettle and all that stuff that blooms some colonies in late January, February. I mean, they can really pack that stuff away. If I find one that's already starting to develop that honey cap, I'll pull a split out of it and let it, like a walkaway split, and let it pull its own queen. If for nothing else, just to get some bees out of the box. So at red maple, I super. When I do an inspection, if I start finding swarm cells, and they're truly swarm cells, you have to know the difference. That's an automatic split. I pull the old queen out with the frame she's on. I shake 2 frames of nurse bees in the new with her, and that's a split because I don't want her in a tree. If I find multiple frames that have swarm cells on it, if I feel froggy, I might do another split, but most of the time I just let them requeen. But yeah, if I open a box and I see swarm cells, I automatically take the old queen out. It's an artificial swarm. It's a swarm that I controlled in the box and didn't have to go cut a tree down.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Again, that's a managed type situation. It's so much easier to manage them than it is to try to get a tree with them. But again, I don't know a single beekeeper that doesn't want to catch that swarm. You know what I mean? You don't want to waste that resource. Beekeepers get crazy when it comes to swarms. And there's all kinds of swarm control measures, even to the point of moving cap brood above your honey supers. Take an extra brood box, put on top of your honey supers, and move cap brood up. Keep that queen down low, but then move cap brood up. Again, the bees don't see that as the population increasing. They see the population steady. And of course, as those bees emerge, they'll come join the rest of them. The only downfall of that is you got to give them a top entrance. If you don't, what happens? The drones. You're always going to have drones that can't get through the queen excluder up there. And so they'll get hung up there and die and make a big mess. So you gotta give them some kind of upper entrance, even just to hold the inner cover to be able to get out, the drones to get out. So again, swarm control is always an issue. I don't think nobody has mastered that, to be honest. I've done the same thing, Tommy. I've cut cells and cut cells and cut cells, and it seems like you just get further behind. I mean, the bees are determined they're gonna do it.
I had one colony this year swarm 3 times in 1 week.
Mhm.
2 of them I saw on video. You saw it, didn't you?
Yes. I was gonna bring this up to you later, but you teach in your classes that first, bees can't read. That bees, the first queen out, stings and kills all the rest of them. This is the year before last this year. I've had a hive packed with bees and sat there and it swarmed 4 and 5 times. And I've got little dudes sitting out there where I try to catch them stupid things, so there's no honey. And is there an answer to that?
There's multiple answers to that. Again, when bees are swarming, swarm cells are not the same age. All swarm cells are different age, okay? So a normal swarm situation, the old queen leaves with a swarm, okay? She takes basically 50%, 55% of the bees with her. Then what happens? Well, the next queen to emerge will start looking for queen cells similar to her age. Capped cells ready to emerge, okay? And so the ones that's not ready to emerge, she don't care nothing about. So she only really cares about who's been piping, okay? And that's the ones she'll sting sometimes through the cells and kill them in place. Other times I've seen it where, again, I've seen 4 and 5 queens in a swarm. Okay, what's happening there? Well, those are all virgins, okay? It's very common on after swarm that after swarm queen or queens are virgins. You catch them, put them in a hive, what happens the next day? She flies, go to mate, and comes back. So she's not a laying queen at the time they swarmed. Because they didn't have time to, shall we say, put her in flight condition. She's already in flight condition. She's a virgin. So that does happen, but that can be frustrating. That can be very frustrating. But I think part of that, to answer your real question, part of that's genetics. Swarming can be a genetic trait, okay? I would not raise queens out of those queens. I would not use them, I would not personally use them as queen mothers, okay? Put it that way.
I gotta go home and smash a bunch then. I've never heard, and I've been through a couple of your classes, I have never heard it explained like that. That explains a lot. And you know, I'm sitting here and I go through a hive and there's a nice superseder cell and I'm thinking, well, you know, maybe you always teach the bees know more than we do, so just let it go. Come out there 2 days later, them stupid bees are swarming, that's the only queen cell in there, so a queen cell also don't have to be hanging on the bottom. They swarm on the superseder cell.
That's right. That's right. And sometimes you say, well, I'm going to use Mark as an example. He's a fine man. But he's making these splits. And he said, now that I got this split, that has diffused the swarming out of the larger colony. Maybe it has, and maybe it hadn't. I can't tell you how many times I have been frustrated on queen castles, and my queen castles swarm. Okay? And I'm talking about, I'm using 2-frame queen castles. Okay? And when I put them in there, there's 1 frame of bees, and I add a frame of foundation to them to give them something to do. Okay? I want that queen to start laying. I want to look at her pattern. I want to judge her. I'm going to grade her. My queen system goes from 0 to 20. Okay? And I will tell you, I've never had a 20. I've had some 14s a few times. When they get down to 5 on my grading system, if they're a 5, okay, guillotine. But anyway, those queen castles with just 2 frames of bees will swarm, and they'll swarm at a drop of a hat. It's unbelievable. That can be so frustrating. My very best graded queen is good numbers. I'm going to use her to requeen a colony, and I go back, and guess what? It's gone. Gone. They just swarmed. That happens. I mean, this happens. Beekeeper failure is all I can say. Okay, next question we got for you, and this is going to be the last question before we open it to the audience for some real questions. Records You keep any records on individual hives or individual years or anything like that?
Yeah, I'll take a piece of Corex, about 4 inches wide and 6 or 8 inches long, and every time I go in one of my hives, I put the date on it, and I put on it what I see. If I see the queen, if I see four frames of brood, or the two frames of larvae, or what I see, I put it on that piece of Corex. I lay it on top of every one of my hives. When I open that lid up, it's sitting right there in front of me. It tells me what I had. And if it was a marked queen, if I happen to have a marked queen, I take the pen that I mark it with and I put me a dot on that piece of Corex if it's, so I know what color it is and what color to look for. And that's how I do my hives. That's the only records I keep, is that piece of Corex on top of my hives.
Okay, Linda and I are somewhat anal, retentive. We like records, so I keep an electronic record of hive observations. And because we love our bees, each hive has a name. And I do not have naming rights on anything on our farm. The children, grandchildren, and now great-grandchildren, they give the name. So our hives are named after characters in Winnie the Pooh. Tigger, Rabbit, Eeyore, Honey, and Bear, and so forth. So Linda and I are out there, and because we have so few bees, we give them a lot of love. And so we're watching, we're making mental and physical notes otherwise. And then after we finish, I go in and call it up on the screen, and I type in, the day in one column, the day, and the weather conditions. And then in bold type, I have, Tigger, Rabbit, Eeyore, whatever. And then a little sentence or so on, what we saw in that hive. And I find that useful because it gives me a chance to go back and check, well, what was going on in this hive last year with my hive. Linda, have we ever had a hive that's lasted more than a year? and also it helps with keeping a record of, when we've done, treatment for mites and that sort of thing.
My system's real simple. I write it with my queen marking pen right on the top of the outer cover. I'll write the date, and I look for, there's 3 things I always look for. I look for the queen, I look for eggs, and I look for stores, okay? If that colony had those 3 things, that's 3 checks. If there's one of those that are missing, then I'll just like 1 or 2 checks. Whichever one's missing, I'll leave that off. And then right under that, I'll make a little note, marked queen, no eggs, whatever. And I also use on top of, and I keep that going as long as the colony is alive. I didn't say the queen, as long as that colony is alive, that information stays on the top of the lid. If the colony ever dies, then I take white spray paint and start over. And I also have 3 bricks on top of my colonies. The 3 bricks coincide with 21 days. If I go in a colony and I don't see eggs, I turn 1 brick up edgeways. If I go in the next week and I don't see them again, I turn another one up. And by the time I get to that 3rd brick, that's 21 days I haven't seen an egg. So that means I'm definitely queenless. Or if I have introduced a new queen or a queen cell, by the time I do it reverse. I'll turn all 3 up, and each week I turn 1 down. By the time I get to the 3rd brick, I should see eggs. She should have emerged and went out and made and started playing. Should have. So that's my little records keeping. I write stuff on the outer cover of my 3 bricks.
Were you gonna say something?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Well, I was going, before we got to general answer questions, I had some show to tell me, but go ahead, Tom.
I also use bricks on top of mine. If I go into a hive and I can't find the queen or can't find the eggs, I'll turn the brick straight up on the end. That tells me I've got to come back to that hive and keep an eye on it. If I come back and I find the queen in there but no eggs, I'll lay it down on its side. That tells me I still got to look at it. And if after a while I just turn it flat down, that means that hive's okay and she's good to go.
I have bricks on top of all my hives, and that's primarily just to keep the wind from blowing the hive. Believe it or not, that can happen. We got some very strong winds in our corner of Cabarrus County this afternoon, and it knocked my trash bin over. This is one of those big 50 gallon. It had, a bunch of, dirty diapers in it. Okay, so it had a lot of, my granddaughter and grandson, they produce a lot of stuff. Okay, I brought a little show and tell. This is absolutely a rookie mistake. I'm a rookie, and I'm going to show you a frame. I'm just going to put it right here. Okay, this frame demonstrates several things that are wrong, okay? All right. The first thing that's wrong, the foundation bowed because I didn't crosswire, and then also violated bee space, obviously. And so, this is pitiful. Desperate times call for desperate measures. I had to have a frame with some foundation on it, and this is what I grabbed out of the box, okay? What happened, I guess 2 years ago, I got to a spree of building frames and foundation, and I did it at Bowman, and I knew it at Bowman. But anyway, those little girls, they did a god of work on that. So then I realized I needed a crosswire. So I got all the material I needed, and like a new religious convert, I went overboard. And I got all the stuff I needed, and the crosswire and crimping tool and so forth. And they're not here tonight, but I'm still not going to mention their names. Then I discovered that 2 distinguished beekeepers whom I highly esteem don't use 4 wires when they crosswire. They only do the 2 middle. Now the marble on their pedestal is starting to crumble in my eyes. But anyway, I felt so accomplished when I did that. But anyway, so I would really, and it looks nice, yeah, it looks nice. And so I would recommend, as a new beekeeper, take the time to at least crosswire the 2 middle ones. Okay, and if you have any questions about it, I can give you some tips, and maybe I should make a YouTube video on it.
There you go.
Okay, very good. Good examples of violation of bee space. And of course, once he got bit, you see what he did. He overcompensated maybe. But
I like the sound those wires make when you crimp them, like a banjo string.
But I think it's interesting. We see that all 3 keep some kind of records. Our memories are not so good. And colleagues have a tendency to look a whole lot alike. And you'll stand, I have done it too. I've stood there and gone, which was where that end? So again, I think bricks are universal. Everybody, a bunch of us use bricks to key us off on, hey, that's got a problem. I do the same thing when I see a major problem I want to attend to real soon. I stand that brick upwards. And I think that's a common practice. That's a common practice among beekeepers. I will go a little bit different what maybe Mark does from the standpoint, I don't have a checklist, okay? So when I'm in a colony, I look at that colony and I say, what does this individual colony need from me today? Is there anything I can do today to help this colony? Okay, and then I'll try to do that. When I do that, I always carry a little piece of note card in my pocket. Just I'll fold it over, Russ, okay, so don't get excited. Full size note card somewhere, if I can unfold it. Just regular 3x5 note card. I've learned a long time ago, my real records don't carry them outside. Don't put them in the truck. Go, you work bees, what happens to your fingers? They get promptus on them, they get honey on them, they get dirt on them. Everything gets sticky. And you make these sorry looking records you ever seen. And so I've gotten a habit of writing down what I did right here. Just one simple line. And of course, I've got all my colonies numbered. For the sake of me being simple, I use used cattle ear tags, okay? And because sometimes when you use used cattle ear tags, you can't be particular about the numbers being in order, okay? So I've gotten a habit of saying, I use a color, like orange. Say that one's orange. One of my best colors right now happens to be orange 16, okay? So that color of that ear tag is orange. So I call it orange 16. So I write down my records. That orange is actually O16. O stands for orange. I hardly ever write anything out. I use letters. And then I'll make a note of what I did. If everything is fine, maybe I add the super. I'll just make a notation, okay, and I'll say plus S. Guess what S is? Super. Okay, now in front of my records, I've got a separate sheet, an index sheet, which is the code for all my letters. Okay, because I don't want to write pages and pages and pages. So I want to keep it where I can look at a colony, and I can look at that one guy. I can do it by colonies, not by the date. I look at the colony, and I can go across there and I can tell you that entire year, every time I was in that colony, and what I did to it. I think that's important, especially when I talk about mite treatments, because I write my mite counts down. If I do a treatment, I write down what the treatment was, and I know what day it was. So again, sometimes it tells me after the fact how to put this nicely, ineffective my mite treatment was. I have found that to be the case more and more here lately. I'm not doing a good job at that. But then at the end of the day, my note card is in my pocket, all sweaty and grungy. I'll sit down in the house with my hands washed and actually do my records. Okay. And again, it works good for me, but it's entertaining, I think, to go back and look. And you kind of say, I know what I did wrong here. You can kind of point your fingers at a few things. Okay, questions from the group. Who's got a question? Yes.
A statement.
Statement, I like it.
Because of what you teach. When we went through, and Tommy can verify this, we've always talked about, he didn't have any plastic foundation. And I know Mark doesn't do that, and Tommy does, but for those that don't know, a good friend of ours told us, said, y'all try that triple dip plastic foundation, that black stuff. All the swarms that I've caught this year, you can take a box and you can put 6 of those regular ones in it, and you can put 2 of those black ones in it, and it don't matter where, they'll pull them out before they'll touch anything else.
Okay, so they prefer it.
I think so. Tommy's run across the same thing in his, and they seem to do, it just goes against a lot. You finally come up, you like the plastic foundation in the super, but just let people know, if you don't like to string all that wire, you don't have to string it on them, you just pop it in, put it in there, and they draw it out. And I may find out that there's a problem with that, and follow something right now, they jump on it quicker than I ever thought they would.
And the stuff is convenient, I'll give it that. I think now they put more beeswax on it, that helps it. The bees will always prefer the dark colors, I can tell you that right now, because they make it white and black. They always prefer the black over the white. And again, I started using some of it in my supers, where I had some old frames, some of which was given to me, had plastic, that I cleaned up, and I've sawed them off to make them smaller to use in my supers. And I found that pull the supers good. But my concern is, and I'm going back to I'm trying to think of the guy's name now, down in South Carolina. He's actually a mechanical engineer. What's his name? Anyway, maybe it come to me. He did some testing on temperature, the difference between beeswax and plastic. Okay? And I was pretty impressed with what he did. It takes more temperature, hot or cold. Temperature don't care, you know what I mean? Hot or cold. To generate temperature through the cone, through that midrib, this is what we call it, that midrib. It took 8 times more temperature to go through the plastic than it did the beeswax. In other words, beeswax transmits heat better. Heat goes through the beeswax better. Well, in the wintertime, I think that's important. As bees are clustered And that cluster's trying to keep themselves warm. Remember how bees go into cells and kind of fill those gaps up to keep warm? I think it's important that heat transfers through that midrib. And hot weather, I think it's the other way around. When the bees are trying to cool that brood area, and they're bringing in water and moisture to help cool that down, I think it's important that, again, that heat can transfer through that midrib easier, shall we say. But all the commercial guys I know that really move bees, they're using plastic now. But again, most of them, are their bees ever in really cold environments very long? No.
The real advantage, one of the reasons I wanted to, if you waste enough money now, it's got so expensive, if, wax moss is going to get your frames or your wax, and this way you can just take it off and start over again rather than go spend another $1.50 for a new piece.
And again, and that's what a commercial guy's using it.
Yeah.
Because you can throw it on a pressure washer and it cleans up really fast.
Use it again.
Yeah, you can use it over and over. Okay, that was a comment. Who's got a comment or question?
I'd like to ask, you're talking about, using black plastic comb, is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay, my question is, when you're catching swarms, I understand that one of the best ways is to put an old comb in there, and it's normally black. Is there a problem with disease in that to catch a swarm by putting it in your swarm box?
Anytime you use an old comb, there's a potential for that, yes. Now, how much of that, years ago, the only thing we were worried about was foul brood, American foul brood on old comb. Sometimes even low spore levels with time with what they build up and then having an outbreak of foul brood. But that was a problem we worried about. And so we didn't do much of that. Nowadays, it's questionable on some of the other viruses being on the comb. And that's why, like Mark is doing a comb rotation, trying to keep that comb as new and healthy as he can keep it. The other thing it does, it keeps down some of the pesticides buildup. Remember, beeswax is a big sink. It picks up stuff easily. And so as bees are flying around the environment, they're flying in yards and picking up all kinds of chemicals. And as they walk on the combs, guess what happens then? Those chemicals put on the comb, and that comb absorbs it. And so, again, what's the end result for the bees? Well, if you get enough of it, it's not healthy. Like anything else, you drink enough of something, it gets you. So there is an issue about old comb, yes.
Did you use some old comb in your swarm trap?
I put out a bunch of swarm traps every year. I'm a firm believer in putting them out so you can catch them. I used to put some old black comb in them. I've got a stack in my shop now. There are probably 150 old frames there with black comb. I've quit using the old black dirty stuff. I try to find some that's a little lighter and a little newer. I'll put one frame in there and then I'll put a frame of foundation. It depends too on where I'm putting my swarm traps. I won't start talking about swarm traps, but if I'm putting my swarm traps where I can keep an eye on them, I put one frame of light drawn cone in there and one frame of foundation. If I'm putting them out somewhere where I can't see them every day or two, I fill that box up with frames, because if you don't, the bees are. And again, I use one frame of light foundation and one frame of light drawn cone and 4 frames of foundation in my swarm boxes.
Okay, part of that issue is bees can always tell where bees have been before, okay? And they like those locations where bees have been before. And so that old comb smells like bees, and that's what draws them. And that's not necessarily the age of comb so much as it smells like bees. And they know bees have been there before. And so that gets bees looking at it and more apt to take that site.
One other question. Once you catch a swarm, do you take that old frame, shake the bees off of it, and use it again, or get it out of it?
Most time, if I catch one, like I say, it's not real dark foundation, I just pull the frame out and put it in the hive and find me another frame of lighter drawn cone and put it in that box. And like Bob said, once you catch a swarm in one of them boxes, if you'll put it back in just about the same location, I have caught 2 swarms in one day in one box. So I'm a firm believer in putting them things out.
Okay, another question?
Mark's situation, his is natural comb, and he changes his every 5 years. And I mark mine, and I've always been told, rotate it every 3 years. What, if they got a new, when do you need to rotate?
I can't answer that. I do not know the answer to that. I don't think it's one magic number. I think rotation is important. All the literature now says rotation is a healthy thing. How much of it? If you want to sacrifice your whole honey flow, you rotate everything every year. That don't make sense to me. And I've got some comb. I'm probably the worst example because I got some comb that's pretty old. If I catch a swarm in a bait hive and I've used some old comb, black comb, throwaway type stuff, do I immediately change it out? I do not. I'll say I'll worry about that a little later. And I'll try to rotate it to the outside edge, you know, where I get some more drones in it, and I'll eventually rotate it. But I'm not paranoid about rotating it right away. I probably should maybe do better than that, but I don't. Okay, another question. Yes, Steve?
How far will a new queen go out on her mating flight? How many, a mile or 2 miles or a quarter of a mile? And will,
You want my answer or you want their answer?
well, yeah, all of them.
Well, we'll have 4 different answers, you know that. Okay, here's how that works. And I have done a bunch of reading and studying and everything else on that and playing around with that. I don't want my mating nukes in my yard that I want my bees to mate with, okay? First thing, normally that's where I've grafted from, and that's their brothers, okay? You want to avoid that, that's bad and everything, so I want to avoid the brothers. So how do you avoid the brothers? We know drones are lazy. They burn a lot of fuel, and that fuel is honey. So they'll go in the morning. Do they get up first thing in the morning? No. Okay. They lay in the hive. They lounge around. Then they say, it's got to get warmer outside. How fast is the wind blowing? They do a lot of considerations, trying to make an excuse not to go. But finally, it warms up enough. They'll beg honey from other bees, nurse bees, which will feed them. They fill up on honey, then they fly, okay? He'll have a flight. He goes to a drone concentration area. Okay, now because bees want to be efficient, those drone concentration areas have been shown time and time again to be no more than a half a mile from that colony. Half a mile is just about their range. Okay, so what's the problem? Here's the problem. You take on fuel, you got so much fuel. That fuel equals flight time, right, Mike? That's flight time, okay? So now I've got to get to my target. Now I've got to be on the target, which is a drone concentration area. So when the queen's going to show up, then it's not going to be at random. The queens will show up at a drone concentration area, okay? So that drone has to stay on target as long as possible until they see that bogey, which is that queen, that virgin queen, okay? Still's got to have enough fuel on board to chase her out, fly the other drones in competition, get mated. Of course, that's the end of him. He's dead. He falls to the ground dead. If he doesn't mate, and that happens more times than not, they're unsuccessful. If he doesn't mate, he's got to have enough fuel on board to return to the colony. And sometimes not the same colony, a colony. But it won't be no more than a half mile away. He'll go in again, he'll lounge around a little bit, he'll get refueled, they feed him honey again, he'll take another mating flight, hoping to find a queen. About 2 a day is maximum. Okay, now queens are different. This is the unique thing about honeybees. It's so fascinating. That queen, first thing she does, you think she'd get on up there where the drones are? No. Because that first half mile is saturated with drones out of her own colony. Okay? So she wants to avoid them. How does she avoid them? She gets low, Mike would say under the radar. Okay? You get it low and fast under the radar. You get past their range. Once you get past their range, then you start picking up and you look for these drone concentration areas. They're saying now, lots of these queens, how do they find them? Queen's never been out. Well, she's taken a orientation flight. They use it the day before in front of the hive for 5 minutes, but she's never actually been flying around. They say now, lots of times, worker bees, as they are foraging, guess what they notice? They notice these drone concentration areas. So sometimes these queens, when they go to a mating flight, they'll have 1 or 2 wing bees, if you can say that, with her to help show her where these drone concentration areas that they saw. And then, of course, she picks up on that and then flies up through them. So again, the average range in North Carolina is from 3/4 to 1 mile.
But if-
3/4 to 1 mile for the queen.
But if you've got 4 or 5 hives in your apiary and.
Okay, your apiary,
Drones,
yeah, your apiary is not gonna be so big, okay? So that's 1 dot on the map. That's really 1 dot on the map. Okay, so draw a 1/2 mile circle. That's your drones. Your queens are mating past that. Now you take another set of hives, Russ's hives, you draw a 1/2 mile circle there. When them circles start overlapping, and then again, that's really the ideal situation because you get a lot more drones. That's what got a lot more drones.
but the drones from, you got the 4 other hives can mate with the virgin queen, can't,
No, because they're too close.
okay.
The location will be too close. She'll fly further than their drones are willing to fly. But they will spend.
How far will she fly? If you've got hives in your acreage, and there's no more acreage.
Yeah.
Within 10
Yeah.
miles of you,
Yeah,
where does she go?
well, it's a good question. And again, the research on that, it said that around here in North Carolina, she'll fly up to 3 miles. Now, in some places, forbid, the deserts in Arizona with your RBs there, they say that queens can fly up to 5 miles or more. But I don't think that's practical here. There's more bees around than you think, okay?
So the queens, not 5 or 6 hives,
Or gonna make with somebody else's queens.
yeah, it's. going-
Not your queens, somebody else's
Russ's or
queens.
somewhere.
Russ's queens,
Yeah,
yes.
Steve, take care of your drones, okay, Steve? Do not cut your drone cells out. A lot of girls do.
By the way, the commercial guys, the real commercial queen breeders that really wanna study genetics a lot, they try to provide 100 drones for every queen they're raising. So they wanna go high numbers. That many is not gonna make the queen, no, but they'd like to see 15, 18, 20 drones make that queen. The more the better, as they look at it from genetics. And so they try hard to provide 100 drones per queen that will be made. That's a big number. That's a big number. Okay, anybody else? Yes.
Will she fly over water,
Yes.
like a lake?
Yes, is the answer to that. Yes.
Quarter mile?
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Just a question for Russ, I think. That's
Okay.
Russ, right? When you, what? Mark. That's right.
Mark's along with the beard.
Okay. When you said you rotate your frames out, does that mean you cut the comb out, it goes in your wax bucket, and you reuse the wood part? What exactly?
Yeah,
does
I
that mean?
reuse the wood. I reuse the wood.
You reuse the wood, but the wax all comes out, goes in your bucket, and you just put new
It's
foundation,
taken out of operation.
but you don't chuck the wood.
No,
No, reuse the wood.
Yes.
New foundation.
no.
And he's using
No,
that wax.
no foundation.
And he's using that wax to make candles and lip balm.
He lets his bees draw.
Yeah.
Your bees are all over.
My entire operation is foundationless.
Yeah, just imagine this up here,
So you just,
all the way down.
do you use wire?
Thanks to my buddy Bob, I do run 2 horizontal wires now. Didn't used to do that.
You do the strip thing, the choppers, nothing.
In a regular frame, you have a cleat that you break off
Yes.
that holds the foundation in there.
Right.
If you break that cleat off, turn it vertically, and nail it back in there, that develops a center point. The bees will festoon off of that. Does everybody know what festoon is? That is a bee plumb bob. They will cling to that, and that's their plumb bob, and they will start building the comb off of that line. Kelly Beekeeping, actually, they don't make it anymore. They've just discontinued it since Man Lake bought them. They made one that the top bar, there wasn't a cleat. It was like a triangle type. It was just, yeah.
Kind of like when you stick popsicle stick in this.
Some people do that. And once, when I rotate my comb out and cut it out of the frame, all I do is put it back in the hive. Because when you do that, and you look at where you cut it out, the midrib Bob mentioned the midrib is still there. The bee, yeah, this is in the comb where the cells on each side meet in the middle. That's the midrib. That midrib is still there. The bees will pull off of that.
So when you say you cut your comb out, you mean you just slice off the outer layer of it?
I cut it completely out of the
Cut
frame.
it completely out. So well, if you cut it completely out, then didn't you just lose the midrib also?
No,
But
it's
the
still
bees
there.
know where it was attached to the
Yeah.
top. And they always want to start from the top, okay?
Yeah.
This type system, always from the top and draw down.
Yeah.
But there's a point on the top. Again, what he's talking about, a lot of it was tapered. You had a little tapered edge. And they're going to go to that furthest down tapered
They're
edge.
gonna build a new midrib.
Yes, they'll build a whole new comb.
Yeah.
But they know where the old one was attached.
I mean,
You spin your comb? You can't spin?
yes, yes, you can.
Really? Without
Yeah.
any?
Yeah. Now, all my new stuff, even for the honey supers, I put the two horizontal wires
Is that
But-
why?
in. No, I've never had one blow out.
Really?
Why do you do the wires?
Because I got a lot more bees now than I used to, and I get in a hurry. And if you're holding that frame and it's not completely attached, obviously across the top,
So keep it
but if it's not completely attached down both sidebars, and you go to flipping it,
It'll fall out.
well, you got a problem. Then it becomes like a top bar
Right.
frame, and you have to be very strategic how you turn it. But with honey frames, once that comb has started to get a little darker, you can
So you give
extract it.
them just two wires just for extra strength, and then
Yeah.
turn your little wood little thingy around, and then make the bees do all the work.
Yeah,
Okay.
All comb, as it ages, gets stronger.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay? All comb, as it ages, gets stronger.
Can I ask one more question?
Go ahead.
I've seen a lot of videos where they separate the gunk from the wax. Is there any way to separate the propolis from the gunk?
Yeah, you can send it to a commercial guy and he can do it.
Okay.
At your house, I don't know no practical way to do it, to be honest. Now, again, years ago, you should take it and put it in a sack and boil water around a 55-gallon barrel, and throw the sack in there and put a couple of Tommy's bricks in the sack, just sink it down to the bottom, and then the wax would then be recovered on the very top. But that's pretty crude and it's not very efficient, but no, there's no easy way.
Okay.
Before I forget it, Darryl, you asked a question about every 3 years in my brood boxes. I do 20% every year. In other words, in a 10-frame box,
Yeah.
I pull 2 every year. Honey supers, just one. I just rotate one out a year.
Yeah.
Because I had bees on those frames all year.
You know, usually the brood, where they raise their broods, the culprit anyhow that gets bad.
Well, they walk on them.
Yeah, and I tried it, I got mine dated, but when I was looking through there the other day, there's one that's got 13 on it, so undoubtedly I don't keep up with that the way I do. Yeah, I know.
Okay, I've got 2 more questions. Let me catch David first. Oh, you're not? What says flagging on the arm of it?
Just tapping on the wall.
Okay, okay.
I've got this for you, but this, I read an article on the internet, my son sent me, and he said, it says, it's a long article that says that, honey from azaleas and rhododendron are deadly.
Correct.
Deadly.
Correct.
Well, how does, Tommy over here not kill us all by having his bees up in the mountains?
Because what happens is other things flowing in at the same time the bees prefer.
Okay.
There are years, and I have seen years in the mountains, when the flow wasn't very good, and the rhododendron was blooming, the bees worked it, and the laurel both, they worked it, and that one is dangerous, okay?
Well, how do you know that?
You don't until you taste it. Okay, now here's how it goes. Here's how it goes. No, that was a couple of cases just a few years ago in North Carolina mountains where that become a little topic. Because what happened, you could eat a spoonful of that honey and immediately say, wow, I don't feel the same. and you get woozy headed. Sometimes you get nauseous on your stomach, but most of the time you just kind of get loopy and you start doing crazy things. Okay? You start climbing the water tank, you start taking your clothes off. And it's actually a, what's the word for it I want to use? Hallucinant. Yeah, I said hallucinant. Now, that's in small doses. I'm talking about a couple spoonfuls would be hallucinant. Past that point, it can be deadly. It can be deadly. Azaleas fall in that same category. But again, how many times do you see bees working azaleas?
Every day.
That's a rare thing. That is a rare thing. Normally they don't work azaleas. Okay? But that doesn't seem to affect the bees themselves. It affects us. That's unusual. Mark, you had a question. Let me catch you in a minute.
Yeah. Have you ever brought frames of brood from a strong hive and put them into weak hives?
Yes.
I do it all the time. I do it every day, just about.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the thing I worry about, am I reinforcing failure? So you have to make a decision, are you putting that brood in, is that hive going to turn out good? Because there was one instance where I put 2 frames after 2 frames after 2 frames of brood into a hive and it never made it. And I looked back on it and said, why did I waste my time?
But there are times, especially if you're trying to control swarming, you might take a frame or 2 out of a real strong colony, shake the bees off of it, cap brood, and move it to a weaker colony. That's kind of called equalizing, okay? That works fine.
Will the bee, if you take too much brood out of one, will the bees in that hive think the queen's not producing and?
No, bees will always accept brood.
I mean, no, the hive that you took it out of, the bees don't, they notice that there's not much brood in there anymore and they think the queen's not.
No. What they judge the queen's performance on is her pheromones. So she's still laying. Okay, that's just opening up the brood nest more, to give them more work to do, and they like that. So her pheromone levels are still high. That's what controls that, yeah. Yeah.
Now, Mark, in my system, that weak hive would be designated as a resource. So I wouldn't be reinforcing it from a production colony. I would actually be using brood and stuff out of the weak hive to make the strong one even stronger. As long as the weak hive doesn't have a pest or disease problem. If it has a pest or disease problem, that's a different issue. If it's just weak, but it's healthy, I would use it as a resource hive to make the other one even that healthier or that stronger.
So you would take it from the other direction?
No.
Yeah.
How do y'all deal with lay-in workers?
Laying workers is an age-old problem, okay? And I have played around with that, and I think most of us have, as far as saying, I'll just requeen her and keep on going. Okay, of course, you can't find a laying worker. First thing is more than one bee. There's gonna be multiple bees as laying workers, okay? You can't see them, you can't identify them. And so the old adage, well, I'll just buy me a new queen, I made a queen, I'll introduce her to the colony, and everything's fine. Everything's not fine. More times than not, they will not accept that queen. They will not accept her. Why? She's not laying, she's in a cage, her pheromone levels are way low, even though they recognize they're a queen, but in their minds, they have a queen because they got laying workers. So somebody is laying, and any bee that lays, any worker bee that lays, even though those eggs won't be worker bees, that still is giving off a pheromone. So those bees have interpreted that as they have a queen. So we don't need that foreign queen. So that's so hard to do to requeen a queen colony. The best solution I have on that is combine with another colony and shoot newspaper.
Well, we just had one, and we took like 3 queen cells and put in it, and we just checked them yesterday, and we got cap brood all over the place.
Yeah, good plan. Good plan. Cap cells will work as good as anything will work. Like I say, now, if you put them on a good colony, combine them, then you can let them be together for a week or two is not better. Split them back off and introduce a queen that works. Because the laying workers have quit laying by that time because there is a good queen in there. And they'll accept the queen then because they just recently queenless, shall we say. Yeah, but the queen cell works great there, no doubt.
Figured it was just a fluke.
Have you ever took the hive, lead workers, go 200 feet out the yard, shake all the bees out, put all the frames back over there? I've done that and sprayed honeybee healthy and put a new queen in there, and that's worked for me.
Okay. I'd give you the benefit of the doubt, say it works sometimes. I've done that before, multiple times. More times than not, for me, it did not work. Okay, it did not work. And I've even gone one step further. When you walk them out there and shake them all out in the grass, I've actually erased their memory a little bit. I won't exactly tell you how I do that. But it's called nitrous oxide. You'll pass them out, they pass out. The other thing it does, two other things it does. Mark ain't gonna like this. Mark, shut your ears, buddy. First thing it does, it shortens their life by about 5 days. Significantly shortens their life about 5 days. Now for worker bees, that's a big number. That's a very big number. Okay. The second thing it does, it erases their memory. They won't remember how to get back to the colony. So you're doing some pretty drastic stuff. And you got to remember, nitrous oxide, what will it do to you? It'll do crazy things to you too. And if you get enough of it sniffed up, you'll fall out too. It'll make you pass out. The very least it's going to do is make you do crazy things. So it's dangerous, don't do it. But nitrous oxide will solve that situation. But I don't think it's good for anything, especially not the bees. Yes, David, last question, David.
I got a comment and a question.
Okay.
About the toxic things. They say if you take your tongue with a little bit of it, if it burns, then it's probably got some toxicity to it. My question is, I've got a swarm that I caught, trying to get it to expand, and I've got a frame that looks kind of like Russ's there. The comb got off to one side, and they keep coming back in and trying to build beside it. And they even put some brood on it. I've gone in there and cut that extra comb out a couple times already. But I'm trying to get the bees to grow sideways. I don't know what to do with that frame. Can I turn it around and face it a different direction?
Okay.
If it's got brood on it, I don't want to get it away from
The first thing that comes to my mind, something is wrong with that sheet of foundation that's bowed out to give it too much space. Okay, so first thing, I think that frame, the foundation of that frame is a cool. It needs to be try again. The other thing I'd recommend is, especially this time of year, right now, spray that brood nest out in the box itself. So put 1 or 2 foundation in between cat brood.
Yeah.
Make them pull that way. That'll give them that much more to work on. They got a resource right now that gives the queen more room to lay. The more room she has to lay, with more cells, guess what? The colony's building up. Yeah. In a normal swarm situation, to get from what 10,000 bees in a swarm, basically a 3-pound package type size swarm, to full production, working production, shall we say. Historically, you might as well say 6 weeks. 6 weeks. Is that a long time?
With or without food?
Doesn't matter.
Would you feed this time of year with the flow?
I wouldn't myself right now. No.
I'm done.
If I saw a couple of days of weather coming in, yeah, I might would.
Okay.
Especially if I'm trying to keep them going. They got to have resources to build that comb. She can't lay if there ain't no comb there.
Yeah.
Okay? Mark, we're going to get you good. Go on again.
Thank you very much, guys.
All right, we'll get on with our business report. Mike, you got a treasurer's report?
Yeah, big thing was the